Thank you everyone for coming to our fourth Thriving Thursdays. We have Dave Mochel, who started last week with part 1, and today is part 2, and I'm super excited. Dave Mochel, for those that weren't on last week, we do have it recorded, so we can send it to you, but Dave Mochel is a mindfulness expert. He travels all over the world. He's a coach, a consultant, educator, a neuroscientist. It's fascinating how much I learned from you, Dave. So I'm super excited to learn today. So I'm going to let you jump in and mute myself and learn from you. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's start by just getting grounded a little bit. I'll ask you to find a posture where you're supporting yourself. So you're just sort of lengthening your spine. Again, not in a way that's rigid. We're not trying to add more tension, but just opening up across the chest, dropping your shoulders, allowing your hands to rest someplace where they'll be comfortable, and either closing your eyes or just allowing your gaze to fall away from the screen for a moment. And just bringing your attention to where your body is. And just checking in, feeling your feet on the ground, your body in the chair. Scanning the middle of your body, just noticing with as much acceptance as you can, whatever's going on there. Finding the sensation of breathing in your body. Maybe in the movement of air through your nostrils or in the back of your throat. Or maybe you can notice some movement in your chest or the area around your stomach, and just resting your attention wherever it is you find the sensations of the breath. If you notice that your attention has wandered, that's perfectly fine. You can just bring it back to the breath. If your attention's wandered, just bring it back. And now I'm going to invite you to take the palm of your hand and rest it gently in the center of your chest in the most kind, sincere, reassuring gesture that you can make toward yourself. And see if you can find just some open acceptance and acknowledgement of whatever it is you're feeling right in this moment. Just a simple, well, of course you're feeling this way, whatever that is. You're feeling this way because you're human. And to go just a little bit further and see if you can't get an inkling of appreciation or gratitude for your own resilience in the face of new challenges, uncertainty, perhaps uncomfortable emotions, and just to acknowledge that you are worthy of your own kindness. Not special, not better than, not more than, but you're just as worthy of your own kindness and compassion as anyone else. Okay. And so bringing your attention back to the screen, And that I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to share some slides. A little bit of it will be review. We'll sort of move through that relatively quickly and onto some new material. But just to remind you that you're just as human as anyone else. We have this phrase that comes out of Judeo-Christian tradition of love thy neighbor as thyself. And we tend to operate out of love thy neighbor and be really brutal to ourselves when things don't go the way we want them to go, or the way we expect ourselves to be, all these things. And so to just bring some genuine kindness and recognition of our own humanity to ourselves, as much as we would to any one of our children or anyone else who struggles from time to time. That's all. So let's see, I'm going to share my screen here. And oops, let's see if we can do this. I don't know what you're doing right now. There we go. Okay, great. So, we've talked about this idea of a hearty life as opposed to a happy or comfortable life. This idea that we can always be happy, that's a fairy tale. That's a great marketing tool, but not really realistic biologically or otherwise. That acknowledge that while feeling uncomfortable is definitely challenging, we're not going to pretend that it's easy to feel emotional, psychological, physiological discomfort. It's challenging, but there's a real opportunity in facing it with acceptance and awareness. And that we can live our lives based on what is fulfilling and what contributes to our well-being, which actually in the long term will make us happier overall than focusing on pleasure and comfort. Our brain's not designed to feel good all the time. And so we talked about the mindset that discomfort is an inevitable part of being human, that struggle is it's sort of the physical resistance, psychological resistance to the way things are. And that you have one nervous system that is designed for short-term survival to keep you safe in the face of threat, and the other part of your nervous system which is designed for long-term growth. And these are designed to alternate in activity. We should have short, acute periods of survival and then longer periods of growth. And the understanding that when we struggle against discomfort, we're actually engaging the very system that's creating the discomfort. So, bearing down, tightening our chest, shoulders, jaw, hands, blaming, arguing, procrastinating, these actually lengthen and intensify the discomfort. They actually don't make it better. And we talked about this idea that we can cultivate things like love and joy and wonder. We don't have to wait until our circumstances trigger them in our nervous system. And that you're constantly practicing. Wherever you put your attention and energy, your brain assumes that's important. You're going to get better. This was once said to me by a counselor, and he said, Dave, the opposite of anxiety is not calm. The opposite of anxiety is faith. And immediately it resonated with me. For some reason, I just intuitively knew exactly what he was saying. And having spent a lot of time thinking about it, this is the way I would frame it, that anxiety is often fueled by this sense that we know what's going to happen in the future and we're not going to be up to it. We don't have what we need to deal with it. So that's a great way to fuel anxiety. Whereas faith is the reality that we actually don't know what's going to happen in the future. There's none of us who can predict what's going to happen a moment from now. We do spend our time predicting what's going to happen in the future, and sometimes we get lucky and we're correct, but we don't really know with any certainty. And it's the trust or the faith that whatever shows up, we're up to it. And the reason I think this is not much of a leap is because that's all been true in your life experience. The fact that you are living and breathing shows that whatever has shown up, you have dealt with. And there's no reason to believe that will change in the future. Or perhaps a more cynical way of looking at it is you'll either deal with it or you'll be dead, like one way or the other. And so, but it's really like you've always been up to it. So let's acknowledge that when we're feeling like, oh my gosh, I won't be able to deal with that. Actually, we have good reason to believe you will. And so this idea of conditional confidence is telling ourselves that it'll be the way we want it to be. And sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. Whereas hearty confidence is, whatever it is, I'll work with it. You know, maybe we'll sign the loan, maybe we'll, you know, this will happen or that will happen. And whatever happens, then we'll take next steps. That's how life works. And so I think the opportunity here of really accepting life as it is, well, what I know from the research, it leads to a whole variety of different things. The sooner we can get to acceptance, this is the way it is, this is what I'm working with, that can calm our nervous system, that can build confidence in our ability to work with whatever it is. It allows us to access compassion for ourselves and others, and understanding that everybody's struggling. This is how it is to be human. It allows us to shift our focus quickly or more quickly to what is really important here, rather than spending our time spinning about how it's not fair that it's this way. And we know from research in business and in medicine and several other fields that we make better decisions if we start from a place of acceptance. You know, we tend to make more impulsive and less principled decisions when we're simply trying to purge discomfort. I call this the, you know, yelling at a small child about the importance of kindness. You know, like in that moment, we just want to get rid of the discomfort. And so instead of speaking kindly about the importance of kindness, we are yelling at a small child about how they should be more kind. Okay, so the last time we talked about this idea of unstruggling, opening up our body, breathing into a soft lower body, and acknowledging that we're feeling what we're feeling, right? And then minding our attention to the present, where our body is, with acceptance for what's happening, and when our attention wanders, bringing it back. So I want to talk just really quickly about 3 more practices. And again, Kelly or Heather, did I send the ebook to either of you? If I didn't, I meant to, and the ebook can be circulated to everyone. It contains more information about all these practices. So great. So trusting your wise self. The way this works is that we spend a few minutes at night. We just get quiet. We ground ourselves. We acknowledge what we're feeling. We maybe practice a little bit of gratitude just to become nice and present and open. And then we look over the day and we self-evaluate. So what worked today? What did I do that was helpful, that contributed to my well-being, contributed to my relationships, contributed to my commitments that are important to me? And if I'm being honest and kind, what didn't work? Like, what are the kinds of things that I did today that weren't useful? They weren't helpful. And we can do that without beating ourselves up. We can actually take sort of a scientific view of this and just say, what's working, what's not working? And then this is what I think is the critical piece. And many people think, yeah, but they don't actually do it. And when they do it, they find it can be quite powerful. And that is, so I fill out this little card. It says, trust your wise self. And I fold it up and I put it in my pocket. And it's based on what's working and what's not working. And then, I've got all of this stuff on here that is really practical wisdom that I can access when I'm restless, overwhelmed, aimless, spun out. And it sits in my pocket. And I pull it out when I've got that 15 minutes of between time and I don't really know what to do with it before the next phone call. And I pull this out of my pocket and it reminds me of the things that really work, like to breathe through my nose and do a soft belly. It also reminds me, it sits by my bedside, it sits on my bedside table, and it reminds me that my day goes better if I start with exercise. And the reason that that's on the top is because I'll wake up in the morning, even though I know that's true, my brain will instantly give me a reason why I should put my exercise off until later in the day, which really functionally ends up meaning I don't exercise, because it always comes up with a reason why there's another, more pressing thing to do. So this is really a way of accessing the wisdom that you already have when you need it. Because when we get in survival mode and we're sort of spun out and frustrated and overwhelmed, we often don't have access to the things that we know are useful. So, and I write a new one each night. So I've got this, stack of them. And then at the end of the week, I just sort of look over and it just, my life becomes more and more and more aligned with the things that are important to me, the things that work. It's not a radical breakthrough or epiphany. It's a disciplined shifting so that my life looks more like what's important to me. And then we know from the research overwhelmingly that being supportive of others is really good for our well-being, really good for our well-being. And what I mean by this is, first and foremost, being willing to be with someone when in their discomfort, rather than jumping to a solution and trying to fix them. Just being able to sit there and say, well, of course that's hard for you. And then to put yourself in a position of serving. And I know that many of you do this in your business lives, and many of us are so good about this in our business lives of saying, how can I support you? And then when we get into our family lives, we totally forget that. And we're totally in solution mode, and we're jumping into fixing people rather than just saying, what do you need from me? How can I support you? What would be helpful right now? Rather than you should. And then finally, and I think this is really important to keep in mind, that there's a whole variety of things that we think we would have when our circumstances are just right. You know, that we'd finally experience happiness and joy and gratitude and love and all these things. And I think the ultimate shortcut is to practice them now. When you're falling asleep at night, why not fall asleep making a list of the people that you love and feeling that in your body? When you wake up first thing in the morning, why not take a moment to connect with what you're grateful for and what's important to you? And really sit with that and feel that in your body, so that we are not just a victim to our circumstances. It's not just when circumstances are the way I want, then I can enjoy my life, I can get meaning out of my life. And when they're not, I just have to get through it until, you know. And my wife and I realized this in our relationship. We realized that early on in our relationship, sometimes when we said, I love you, actually what we meant, if we were really honest with ourselves, is, you are being the way I want you to be, which isn't the same thing, right? We'd be on vacation, we'd be someplace, things were the way we wanted them to be, and we were being kind to each other, and we'd turn and say, I love you, which it's like, I want to have a relationship where we can be in the middle of an argument and I can say, you know, we totally disagree about this and I love you. You know, I want to be really clear about not making love just based on if things are the way I want them to be. So those are the practices. There's more details in the ebook, which I'll send to Heather. I thought I already did, but I'll send to Heather and Kelly. And I think we're going to stop there. So I'm going to stop share, and we've got about 10 minutes for questions and thoughts and reactions and responses. Or we'll just sit quietly for 10 minutes. Either one.
I think you can unmute. If anyone wants to unmute, they can unmute themselves. One thing that really hit me, Dave, that I just want to say, instead of saying, well, you should do this, instead replace it with, what do you need from me? And be supportive versus a solution, trying to be the solution. I thought that was really cool.
And one of the things I think that is
really, really cool,
whether it's in an interpersonal, intimate relationship with a partner or a child or whatever, or whether it's in a leadership position with a team or a coworker, I think it's also can be really helpful to check in once in a while and say, am I supporting you the way you need? Are you feeling supported? That it's a really great way to get feedback about what people need, rather than simply us doing the mind reading and giving them what we think they need. We can just check in and be a little more direct about that. And you know, and I, you know, about every 3 or 4 days, I'll just say to my wife, you know, are you feeling supported? Is this working for you? This thing that we're doing, rather than just make the assumption, well, we've each got a ring on, so I guess it's good. You know, to really think about the kind of relationship that we can, and it doesn't have to be this long, arduous, like we need to process our relationship. It can just be, are you feeling supported? And what are the things that are working and not working? And, you know, and sometimes it's very like, I'd love it if you would just put your dishes in the dishwasher instead of just putting them in the sink. Great, thank you, got it. You know, it can be that sort of detailed. And by the way, also, if you are a parent or if you are supervising someone, I mean, ultimately what you want is for them to figure out the solution for themselves, for them to figure out what they need, rather than, you know, we can with the best intentions, we can hamstring people. If we're the one who's always solving the problem for someone else, when do they learn how to solve those problems?
Does anyone have any questions, comments, thoughts?
I was going to add something. Kelly, I agree with you. I liked being supportive of others and asking what you need. But I also like the practice what you seek. I think that's so interesting. And I think maybe I mentioned something last week, but the idea of we want to experience joy, we want to experience all these great things, and yet in real estate and lending, on a Friday night at 4:45 when somebody wants all this stuff, I'm trying to decide how am I going to enjoy with this person when really I'm annoyed that they weren't prepared to write an offer earlier, and so so you kind of have to take a breath. I think you have to stop and say, you know what, I do love what I do and I'm here to help, and I'm just going to enjoy this, but it's the practice part, and I think you really have to be mindful of that, and I think that's what you're saying, but I really appreciate you bringing that up in your presentation.
Yeah, and I want to be really careful about that too. Is again, I think I said this last time, but this word "and," right? Like, if I'm honest with myself, I am a little annoyed that this request is coming in at 4:45. Like that, right? Yeah, like that's true. And this is my chosen work, and this is an opportunity to serve, and I can do this with a little more kindness, a little more grace, a little more love. It's because sometimes we can beat ourselves up with positivity. We can sort of be pretty unkind to ourselves around, come on, Dave, like just lighten up in a way that's really not kind. And so it's that and I am annoyed. This is what my nervous system is doing. And I have a choice about how I move forward. The piece also that I want to add to this is to look really carefully. I call it the fundamental fear, this fear that we're not enough, that we're not deserving of love, that there's some like flaw, something wrong with us that we have to overcome, that we have to, we have to prove ourselves worthy. We have to improve ourselves in order to be enough. And I've been looking really carefully at the way that this shows up in my own life and in other people's lives. Often what will happen is we'll get a request or we'll get feedback, and without even knowing that is sort of getting filtered through this idea that who I am is not enough, that I need to prove I'm worthy, it gets immediately protected by things like annoyance, frustration, anger, these things that come out. And if we look at those, we'll see they're often secondary to fear. And often the fear is that maybe I'm not doing a good enough job, maybe I'm not enough as I am, maybe I'm not. And the reason I'm so fascinated with this is because that whole thing is a story. Right? That's a story that we feel in our nervous system. The same way, is there anyone here who believed in Santa Claus? Is there anyone who believed in Santa Claus when they were a little kid? Yeah. And the thing I love about that is we believe that Santa Claus was real. So when we came down, we used to put out cookies, and then I'd come down in the morning and there was a bite out of one of the cookies, or some of the cookies were missing. And so because I believed in Santa Claus, there was the quickest explanation. Of course, the man who shimmied down my chimney, who left the gifts under, he's the one who took a bite out of the cookies. It never occurred to me at that time that my parents were the one who were taking the bite out of the cookie, right? That explanation wasn't even necessary to consider. So all the evidence that morning was all filtered through the belief that Santa Claus existed. As we got older, I hope this isn't a spoiler, we realized that Santa Claus, the actual, not the spirit of, but the physical being, didn't exist and never existed. That we used to wholeheartedly believe in something that was never true, right? We would have passed a lie detector test because we fundamentally believed it. I think this is also true in the belief, the story, that who we are as we are is not quite enough. And stuff gets filtered through that. Criticism gets filtered through that. Praise gets filtered through that. When things don't work out the way we hope they would, that becomes evidence, once again, that we're not enough. And so I think it's really important to look at that and see, do you really have any empirical evidence that in some objective measure, you are not enough? you know? And one of the great ways to do that is to look back to your much, much younger self and just think about what it was like for them to travel through the world feeling like they had to prove themselves, whether it was through grades, whether it was through getting the approval of their parents, whatever it was, and just see, that poor little 5-year-old, and just have some real compassion for that. And pretty soon you start to see that you're carrying around that story with you, and it's not helping. It's not helping. Now, I want to be also very clear. It doesn't mean there's not stuff you can work on. It doesn't mean there isn't stuff you need to accept responsibility for, right? You say something that's upsetting to someone, you can go back, but none of that has to start from there's something wrong with me that I need to fix. So I think it's really worth looking at that critically, seeing the impact it has, and seeing, like, is that based on anything other than I just sort of internalize that from things that were going on around me? You know, imagine what it would be like to walk through the world with a felt sense that who you are as you are is enough, and you are free to work on whatever you want to work on, but you don't have to prove yourself to anyone, especially yourself. What would that be like? Final thoughts?
Yeah,
Reactions?
anyone else have any thoughts? Well, I wrote down first, don't say who we are as we are is not enough. I wrote down who we are as we are is enough. And just rephrasing that. That was really cool. I love that statement.
Yeah, and here's the other thing I think is very useful, is to sit with that statement and see what shows up physically, like what you feel about that. Because it's one thing to have it as like a cognitive mantra. It's another to just notice, oh, I've actually got some real resistance to that, you know, or like, or I long for that, but I don't actually feel it. And to practice starting to embody. And one of the things I think is helpful for people is to start to practice it with what if, or maybe I am enough. Like what would you like to entertain that? Or what if there isn't anything wrong with me? Like what would that mean for my life? You know, maybe I'm just human and there's some things I'm skilled at and some things I'm not. And some, you know, yeah, what would that be like? What if? Okay.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Dave. And we will definitely send out the ebook. I look forward to it. I want to read it myself. And I know it's right at 10:30, so I just want to let everyone know what we have coming up next week. I don't know if you've heard of Ninja Selling, but we have a guest speaker, Rebecca Lorenz. She is a certified ninja coach. We've gone through Ninja. Cornerstone is a ninja-based company. It's a really cool, it's not, they shouldn't say ninja selling. It's creating value and really focusing on gratitude. I think it's a great leap off, or a transition from what Dave was talking to us about. This is really about incorporating in, you know, a ninja mindset and really focusing on daily habits that are great and gratitude. And it's a very, very cool system, Ninja Selling. So please come for next week, and thank you all. And again, Dave, thank you so much. I can't wait to schedule our Lunch and Learn so we can have you speak for an hour on your stuff. It's just so, I find it so fascinating. So thank you.
Great.
Amazing.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.